The moment news broke that Malcolm-Jamal Warner had passed away, everything seemed to stop. Fans were left speechless. The entertainment industry froze. But what happened inside the prison where Bill Cosby was serving time took the world by complete surprise. You won't believe this. Just minutes after hearing the tragic news, Cosby reportedly collapsed in his cell. His legal team said it was from shock, but insiders claimed it was something much deeper, something emotional, personal, and possibly tied to decades of secrets and regret. The bond between Cosby and Malcolm wasn't just professional, it was personal. Cosby had always seen Malcolm as more than just a co-star. He called him his son. But here's the shocking part. No one expected this death to hit him harder than any trial, any scandal, or even his own downfall. According to prison insiders, Cosby had been sitting in his cell going through legal paperwork when a correctional officer approached him. The officer quietly handed over a printed news clipping. Cosby looked down at the paper, and the words, "Malcolm-Jamal Warner found dead," stared back at him. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then, with a dazed expression, he whispered, "No, not Theo," before clutching his chest and falling back onto his cot. Medical staff rushed in immediately, and within moments, he was taken to the prison infirmary under close watch. The official story was that it was a stress-related fainting episode, but this is where it gets interesting. People close to Cosby said this wasn't just about grief, it was about everything that had built up over the years: guilt, memories, and a silence between them that had never been broken. You see, Malcolm-Jamal Warner had never publicly trashed Cosby, even when the media was tearing him apart during his legal battles. While many of his co-stars either supported or spoke out against Cosby, Malcolm stayed silent. And that silence, according to insiders, haunted Cosby more than the words of his loudest critics. Because sometimes silence from someone you love says more than any statement ever could. One prison worker claimed that Cosby sat quietly in the infirmary, repeating to himself, "He was my son. He was my son," over and over again. What made this moment even more heartbreaking was the rumor that Cosby had recently written a letter to Malcolm, a personal note full of old memories and unspoken feelings. But that letter was never sent, and now it never could be. From the very beginning of The Cosby Show in 1984, there was something special about the connection between Cosby and Malcolm. On screen, they played father and son, Cliff and Theo Huxtable, but off screen, that connection was even deeper. When Malcolm joined the show at just 14 years old, Cosby saw something in him. He took him under his wing, mentored him, and even adjusted scripts to give Malcolm more spotlight. Crew members from back in the day described Cosby as protective, even obsessive, about Malcolm's future. He coached him constantly, told him to stay out of trouble, avoid fame's traps, and focus on his craft. Cosby often said Malcolm reminded him of himself, young, talented, and full of promise. But as Malcolm got older, things started to change. He became more independent, started producing, making music, directing, and even dated stars like Regina. Slowly, he began to pull away from Cosby's influence. And when the scandals around Cosby started to surface, that distance turned into silence. Unlike Felicia Rashad, who publicly defended Cosby, Malcolm refused to speak. In interviews, when asked, he'd say things like, "It's complicated," or "I'd rather not say." Let me tell you, that hit Cosby hard. A longtime friend once said Cosby would often ask, "Why won't he call me back? I raised that boy." That emotional disconnect created a wound Cosby never showed in public, but those close to him said he carried it every day behind bars. Even though they hadn't spoken in years, Cosby had reportedly told a fellow inmate just weeks before the tragedy that he missed Malcolm. He talked about the good old days, back when things were simple, before the trials, the scandals, the headlines. He told the inmate he was thinking of reconnecting, maybe sending a letter to say sorry for everything that had come between them. But destiny took an unexpected turn. Now that opportunity was gone forever. After the news of Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death spread across headlines, reactions from the entertainment world began pouring in. But one name kept coming up again and again: Regina King. Their love story had long been one of Black Hollywood's most private yet powerful relationships, and even though they had broken up more than a decade ago, their connection clearly never faded. You won't believe how deep their bond really went. When Regina got the call about Malcolm's death, she reportedly collapsed to the floor. Friends say she didn't just lose an ex, she lost a soulmate. This wasn't just grief, it was heartbreak, layered on top of heartbreak. Remember, Regina had already faced unimaginable pain with the tragic loss of her only son, Ian, just a few years earlier. And now it was like the universe was breaking her heart all over again. But here's where it gets interesting. Many people didn't know that Regina and Malcolm actually met way back in the 1980s, long before their romance began. She was working on 227, and he was already making waves as Theo on The Cosby Show. Even back then, people said there was something between them, something unspoken. Years later, after life had taught them both some hard lessons, they reconnected. Regina was a single mom at the time, and Malcolm had stepped back from the spotlight. Friends described their relationship as peaceful, mature, and full of real support. Malcolm adored her son. Regina encouraged Malcolm's music. They stayed out of the headlines. No drama, no scandals, just quiet love. But then, without warning, it all ended in 2013. No public breakup, no messy social media posts, just silence. They vanished from red carpets, interviews stopped, and when Oprah asked Regina about the breakup years later, she simply said, "Sometimes love isn't enough. Timing matters." Malcolm never spoke about it publicly, but those closest to him said he never truly moved on. In fact, one of his close friends revealed that Malcolm still kept photos of Regina and her son on his phone. He lit up whenever someone mentioned her name. And this is where the story takes a heartbreaking twist. Sources say that just months before his death, Malcolm and Regina had quietly started talking again. They weren't officially back together, but the emotional connection was clearly still alive. They were even working on a private creative project together, a limited series about love, loss, and legacy. It was supposed to be their comeback, their way of healing, their way of honoring everything they'd been through. But destiny had other plans. After Malcolm passed away, Regina stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, just one simple, painful post on her Instagram story. It was a black and white photo of Malcolm with 3 haunting words: "I'm shattered forever." That post alone sent fans into a spiral. People knew this wasn't just a casual tribute. This was deep. And when someone close to Regina spoke anonymously to the press, they said, "She always thought they'd reconnect someday. Maybe not as a couple, but as soulmates. Now that chance is gone forever." And that's not all. There were quiet whispers in the industry, people saying Malcolm had written a final letter, a handwritten note found among his personal belongings. It reportedly said, "If I leave this world tomorrow, tell Regina I'm sorry for all the silence. She deserved more, always." Whether the letter is real or not, fans believed it because it sounded like the kind of thing Malcolm would say. Soft, honest, and full of emotion he never shared publicly. And for Regina, who had already lost so much, this was one more wound she had to carry. One more goodbye she never got to say. One more silence that would never be broken. As fans and celebrities mourned Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death, a new question began spreading like wildfire across the internet. How did he really die? The official statement said drowning, but people close to Malcolm weren't convinced it was that simple. This is where it gets dark. According to early reports, Malcolm's body was discovered face down in shallow water near a private shoreline estate in Southern California. He had been staying at a secluded retreat, one of the few places he visited when he needed peace, privacy, and time to think. But this time, something felt different. Friends said Malcolm had been pulling away for months. He wasn't returning calls, and when he did, he seemed distant, distracted. He told some people he was fine, just tired, told others he needed a break, but one close friend said he kept saying he needed time to clear his head. That may have sounded normal on the surface, but now it felt like a warning no one noticed in time. And just weeks before his death, Malcolm suddenly pulled out of a major TV project, a comeback show that was meant to mark his return to primetime. No announcement, no interview. He just backed away. That move raised eyebrows, but the truth behind it wouldn't be discovered until later. Let me tell you, this is where things get even more painful. At the scene of his death, investigators reportedly found a personal journal. Inside were pages filled with raw emotions, notes about pressure, pain, and private struggles he had never shared publicly. Some entries, according to one insider, sounded like cries for help. And though the police first treated the case as an accidental drowning, the medical examiner's office confirmed that toxicology tests were being done. To this day, no official cause of death has been released. And that silence, it's only making the questions louder. Some tabloids started whispering about possible substance use. Others hinted that a mental health crisis may have played a bigger role than anyone wanted to admit. But Malcolm's family, especially his mother, Pamela Warner, remained heartbreakingly quiet. Her only public words were, "I have lost my son, my light, and my soul's deepest joy. I ask for your prayers, not your questions." That one sentence said more than any press conference ever could. Still, the speculation wouldn't stop. Fans started digging. They found an old quote Malcolm had posted to his private Instagram story just days before his death. It read, "Sometimes the brightest light comes from the soul that's hurting the most." Looking back, it felt like a goodbye, or at least a cry from someone carrying more than anyone realized. Then came the shocking revelation from one of Malcolm's former assistants. She claimed Malcolm had been silently battling chronic depression for years and that he had longstanding heart issues that were never made public. She said he would sometimes miss meetings, cancel appearances, and isolate himself, but always managed to smile through it. He was carrying a weight none of us could see, she said in a quiet interview. The craziest part? When fans began piecing everything together, his sudden silence, the journal, the secret heartbreak with Regina, and the mystery surrounding his health, it no longer felt like just a tragic accident. It felt like something more, something layered, something that had been building for years. And now, his name sits alongside others who face the same silent battles. Gary Coleman, Orlando Brown, Jesse Smollett, all child stars who struggled behind the cameras. But Malcolm's case was even more heartbreaking because no one ever saw it coming. He smiled, he performed, he inspired, and he carried it all, like, alone. As tributes to Malcolm-Jamal Warner continued to pour in, the cast of The Cosby Show seemed absolutely shattered. To them, Malcolm wasn't just a co-star, he was family. Felicia Rashad, who played his on-screen mother, released a deeply emotional statement, saying, "I've known Malcolm since he was a boy. This world was lucky to have him, and I was blessed to call him my son on and off the screen." But the pain didn't stop there. Raven Simone, who played little Olivia, went live on Instagram just minutes after hearing the news. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "He was one of the real ones. He looked out for me when I was just a kid. He told me not to let Hollywood change me. I didn't listen to a lot of people, but I listened to him. I'm broken." Tempested Bledsoe, who played Vanessa, shared a throwback photo from their final season, laughing behind the scenes. Her caption simply read, "We laughed until we cried in this moment. And today, I'm crying for real. Rest easy, Mal. You were always the heart of the set." Even Keshia Knight Pulliam, who played Rudy, broke down in her podcast episode just hours after the news went public. She recalled a conversation from the show's final episode where Malcolm had pulled her aside and said, "Promise me, whatever happens in life, don't let the world harden your heart." Through sobs, she told her listeners, "He lived by those words. He was the glue for us. I don't know what we're going to do without him." But what hit people the hardest was Bill Cosby's response. Through his legal team, a brief statement was released. "Malcolm was my son. I raised him on screen and watched him become a man. This is a loss beyond words." And although the words were few, insiders said they didn't come easy. Behind bars, Cosby was reportedly still not the same after the collapse. He ate less, spoke less, stared off for hours in silence. It seemed like everything he had bottled up for years, all the regrets, the pain, the distance, came crashing down the day Malcolm died. Meanwhile, fans turned their attention to Regina King once again. Some begged the Cosby Show cast to publicly support her, knowing she too had lost someone she deeply loved. But none of the cast directly reached out. Not publicly, at least. That silence triggered even more sadness. It felt like Malcolm had left behind broken pieces scattered across many hearts. Some from his childhood, some from his time in the spotlight, and some from the relationships that never got to heal. But just when people thought the story was over, another rumor surfaced. TMZ insiders claimed that among Malcolm's personal belongings was a handwritten letter, a final note. And one part of it simply said, if I leave this world tomorrow, know that I loved hard, maybe too hard. Tell Regina I'm sorry for all the silence. She deserved more, always." Whether this letter will ever be confirmed doesn't even matter to fans anymore, because those words, they felt real. They sounded like the Malcolm everyone knew. A man full of emotion, quiet strength, and unresolved pain. And maybe that's what made this loss so unbearable. Malcolm wasn't just an actor, he was a symbol for Black boyhood, for brotherhood, for quiet brilliance. From the way he portrayed Theo Huxtable to the way he inspired young artists behind the scenes, he carried the hopes of a generation. But while he lit up the screen for others, no one saw the darkness he carried within himself. This tragedy is a powerful reminder. Behind every smile, there might be pain. Behind every silence, there might be a story. And behind every strong person, there might be a battle we'll never understand. So let's remember Malcolm, not just for what he gave us on screen, but for what he fought through behind the scenes. Now it's your turn. Drop your love, memories, or tribute for Malcolm-Jamal Warner in the comments below. If this story moved you, like the video, share it, and hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes we need to speak the names of the ones who stayed silent for too long. Rest in power, Malcolm. You will never be forgotten.